We go live. Good morning, China. Good evening, US. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the third China-US Anti-Cancer Summit. I'm Lynn from US Chinese Anti-Cancer Association. I'm your host today. This event is organized by China Anti-Cancer Association, CACA, US Chinese Anti-Cancer Association, USCACA, and co-organized by eChina Health and Corp2D. This program is made possible through independent educational grants from Beijing, Europe, Amoy Diagnostics, and Fosun Pharma. Now let's welcome Vice President of China Anti-Cancer Association, Secretary General of Asian Oncology Society, Professor Ying Wang, to make opening remarks. Professor Wang, please.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Yan Li's introduction. Dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good evening. It's my great honor and pleasure to address at the opening ceremony of the 2023 China-US Anti-Cancer Summit. On behalf of Professor Daiming, the president of CACA, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to USCACA and eChina Health for jointly hosting the World Leading Cancer Summit. To share and improve cancer care, CACA works closely with leading cancer organizations globally. Last December, we successfully hosted 2022 China-US Anti-Cancer Summit by inviting 2019 Nobel laureate Professor Greg Semanza, the past president of AACR, Professor Lisa Cousins, and the past president of ASCO, Professor Eric Werner. The event attracted 5 million audiences online worldwide. Following the leading summit, this year, CACA has jointly held several anti-cancer summits, including China-Europe, China-Australia, China-Latin America, and China-Africa Anti-Cancer Summit. The viewers online were over 65 million in total from 30 countries around the world. Today, we gather here once again to embark on this crucial journey towards combating cancer together. I believe this summit will help professionals from China and the United States to work together to facilitate academic exchanges and international collaborations, and will take contribution and to make contribution to the global cancer control. Finally, I wish the China-US Anti-Cancer Summit a great success. Thank you.
Yes, Ying.
I was so good, I muted myself. Thank you, Professor Wang. You have been a very generous supporter of U.S. Chinese Anti-Cancer Association. And you witnessed, when we first formed 15 years ago, and you mentored us, you supported us through the entire journey for the 15 years. And now we have over thousands of members globally and followers. So thank you for everything. Cancer is a disease of global impact, and therefore it demands global approaches to fight cancer. For our event today, we gather the leaders, great minds of Chinese Anti-Cancer Association, CACA, American Society for Clinical Oncology, ASCO, American Association for Cancer Research, AACR, and for this year, we also honored to have representations from American Cancer Society, ACS. So I promise you an event filled with stimulating scientific discussions. So now let's start our keynote speech session. Our first speaker is President of the Chinese Anti-Cancer Association, member of the U.S. Academy of Medicine, President Emerit of the World Federation of Integrative Health Societies, Professor Daiming Fan. Professor Fan will discuss development of a holistic integrative management of cancer in China. Professor Fan.
Dear the Chairman, Professor Yang, dear Professor Greenberg, dear Professor Schuchter, dear Professor Dahut, dear all my colleagues from China side, ladies and gentlemen online, good morning or good evening. I'm Daiming Fan, the president of CACA. I'm very pleased to participate in this international conference to share our latest contribution on holistic integrative management of cancer. As you know, China bears heavy cancer burden. According to the statistics, about 1 out of 4 cancer patients in the world is from China. About 1 out of 3 patients died of cancer is from China. There are about 8,000 patients died of cancer every day, while the 5-year survival rate of cancer patients in the United States is about 70%. It is almost 40% in China. Standard diagnosis and appropriate treatment is the key to improve overall outcome of cancer. Therefore, guidelines play an important role in cancer prevention and treatment. As everybody knows, one cannot completely copy the guidelines from other countries because the treatment of the same cancer should have a different focus in different countries. For example, liver cancer ranks the second cause of death in China. The main etiology in the US is HCV, while in China, it is mainly caused by HBV. Hepatitis C is curable with antivirus therapy. So the HCV-induced liver cancer is theoretically curable. However, it is difficult to cure the hepatitis B. Hence, the key to treat hepatitis-induced liver cancer lies in etiology. In terms of the gastric cancer, it is closely related to the Helicobacter pylori, HP. The preventive treatment requires HP eradication. The infectious rate of HP in China is over 60%, but it is not the case in the US. If we eradicate HP when treating the tumor, it can bring better results. As for the esophageal cancer, which ranks the 4th in China, it is mainly esophageal squamous cell carcinoma, ESCC, in China, but in the US, it is mainly esophageal adenocarcinoma, EAC. In China, it is mostly related to the dietary habit, for example, consuming too much nitrate, while in the US, it is mostly caused by reflux disease. Therefore, in China, we cannot adopt the guideline for EAC treatment in the US. Due to the current situation of unbalanced medical resources and non-standard cancer care in China, it is necessary to develop guidelines on cancer management that adhere to the concept of whole course holistic integrative management and operable in clinic with accessibility at the grassroots level. From 2022 to 2023, CACA organized over 13,000 leading experts to develop the CACA guidelines for holistic integrative management of cancer. The guideline contains more than 10 million Chinese characters and was published in both English and Chinese with 46,500 continued medical education questions and answers. Recently, it has been translated into 16 foreign languages. It includes 113 guidelines covering 53 types of tumor in the tumor chapter and 60 techniques in the technical chapter. The 53 types of tumor in the tumor chapter covers 97% of Chinese tumor patients. The technique chapters divided the guidelines into 6 categories, including overall assessment, supportive treatment, diagnostic techniques, therapeutic techniques, normal organ protection, and basic research. Adapting previous guidelines, but emphasizing the uniqueness of Chinese physicians, it becomes a standardized guideline system with both Chinese characteristics and international perspectives. China's attitude towards cancer may be complementary with the Western. We advocate the concept of holistic integrative medicines and emphasize on multidisciplinary treatment, MDT, to holistic integrative management, HIM, which means to establish a multidisciplinary working model to formulate an individualized and integrated healthcare plan, and last, to achieve an optimal effects using the holistic view and integrative regimen. As you know, the growth of a tumor is related to the cell, the environment, and the natural force of the human body. Whether the seed can grow into a tree depends on not only the seed itself, but also the whole environment. There is a great amount of essence in traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, that we can't forget. For instance, we found that arsenic trioxide, which was used in TCM 2,000 years ago, can treat acute promyelocytic leukemia, APL, with a great effect. Another example is artemisinin. It is extracted from plants and can be used to treat malaria. And Mrs. Yu too has won the Nobel Prize because of it. Now, it is found that antimethicillin can reverse not only the bacterial drug resistance, but also the tumor cell drug resistance. Besides, TCM indicates 2,000 years ago that microbiome can treat diseases. If chemotherapy doesn't work for the tumor and multiple drug resistance occurs, we don't need to deal with tumor cells. We just need to change the intestinal microbiome, and the drug resistance of a tumor cell can be reversed. Thus, our guideline has integrated TCM with Western medicine. Foreign guidelines emphasize more on diagnosis and treatment, but ours are different. As I mentioned before, CACA guidelines focuses on the whole process of prevention, screening, diagnosis, treatment, and rehabilitation. As you know, 1/3 of the tumor can be prevented by changing lifestyle. I am a gastroenterologist. Most of the time, more than 260 endoscopic procedures were performed in my department per day, but most of the endoscopic screening for cancer are lengthy. We need to perform tens of millions of endoscopic screening for cancer in China. If we stratify and focus on the high-risk population, we will get more efficient results. And also, the follow-up for rehabilitation is very important after the treatment for cancer patients. Doctors need to conduct a follow-up and provide guidance for patients. For example, patients with lung cancer, which is caused by smoking, should stop smoking after treatment and change their lifestyle. CACA technical guidelines for holistic integrative management of cancer is on the technique and how to choose the appropriate treatment for different patients. It focuses on assessment, support, control, protection, and survival. The first is assessment. We should assess the patients before receiving surgery or other treatment. In China, around 50% of the cancer patients are anemic, but 92.8% of them directly undergo surgery or other treatment without treating anemia. 70% of the patients are malnourished, and 70% of them directly undergo surgery or other treatment. We should treat the cancer patient rather than the patient's cancer. Thus, we need to perform whole body assessment for patients in the future. Second is support. After this assessment, we need to complement the insufficiency such as nutrition and psychology to make the patient be strong enough to undergo the surgery or treatment. Third is a control. We should control the growth of a tumor cell rather than just kill them, because every people has tumor cells, and they will only become cancer when growing into a certain amount. If we kill tumor cells, the normal cells will also be killed. Hence, many cancer patients die faster once get treated. Fourth is a protection, which means to protect the normal organs. Large population, the proportion of cancer patients die from the damage of normal organ functions, such as the damage of a liver caused by hypercalcemia due to cancer of the treatment of cancer. All kinds of treatment do harm to normal organ functions. Surgery is a mechanical damage. Chemotherapy is a chemical damage. Radiotherapy is a physical damage. Biotherapy is a biological damage. There is also psychological damage. Cancer patients are weak, and it will cause problems if we don't protect them. We have specially developed 15 guidelines on normal organ protection. In CACA, there were 2 teams, one specializing in treating cancer, such as the Hepatic Cancer Society, and the other specializing in protection the normal organ, named the Oncology Society. And the 2 teams work together to treat patients with much better results. Last is survival. the prognostic effect doesn't only refer to the removal or the reduced size of tumor, and they are just surrogate endpoints. The primary endpoints should refer to prolonging survival time and improving the quality of life. These two indicators can be used to evaluate which therapy and which doctor is better. The patient may die even if the tumor is cut out, and this is not the effect we hope to achieve. In the last 2 years, we have released and promoted the CACA guideline nationwide. We have held 100 sessions, not only to doctors, but also to the public, with a total of more than 2.6 million online attendees. From the November 16th to 19th, we held the 2023 Chinese Congress on Holistic Integrative Oncology, CCHIO. It is a significant platform to promote the concept of a holistic integrative management of cancer, as well as the CACA guidelines. The main Congress venue was in Tianjin, and there are over 30 branch venues across nation in China at the same time. Altogether, 218 sessions have been held. The Congress brought together the 48, 62 national and international speakers, and attracted the 165,000 participants in total online. Online. Over 100 experts from different countries and regions attended the 2023 CCHIO. 4 international sessions were held during the Congress, including 90 units. The international sessions attracted over 60.9 million online viewers. We have been learning from the foreign guidelines and got benefits. However, the MTT to him model in CACA guidelines may reversely benefit to other countries. The 5-year survival rate in foreign countries, for example, the United States, is 70%. By adopting foreign guidelines previously, the rate in China has reached 40%. However, the CACA guidelines will help us improve for the rest 60% and may provide references for foreign countries to solve their rest 30%. So, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fan, for your excellent presentation and for your leadership in promoting adoption of holistic approaches for cancer treatment and management in China. I firmly believe that these guidelines and approaches will help us improve the 5-year survival rate, and most importantly, to give back the patients their much deserved quality of life. So now we'll invite current president of American Association of Cancer Research, AACR, the Professor Philip Greenberg, and he is an international renowned immunologist, and he is a professor at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. Dr. Greenberg.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me get my slides on. And I will. Okay, that is working now, right?
Yes, it's working. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about about the progress that's being made in cancer research, largely focusing on what's been accomplished in the United States, and mostly in my role as the current president of AACR. And then I, of course, couldn't avoid but put in a single slide that's actually my own work, because that's what I'm passionate about. But I will get to that shortly. Let me start the slides. Yeah. So this is just to give you a sense of the size of AACR. We've grown enormously since the turn of the century. I'm sorry, the years are not appearing here. I don't know why there's something missing on these slides, but we have 58,000 members in 2023, and they're in 135 countries. And so it's become a truly international organization. And we try to make sure that our activities reflect not just the needs of the cancer researchers in the US, but also the researchers throughout the world. One of the highlights of AACR's activity is our annual meeting. This year, or this coming year in April, it will be held in San Diego. We're expecting about 24,000 attendees. This is an event that really is meant to bring people together to promote interactions, share information and data, create networking opportunities. And it's usually not only well attended, but one that is usually very much appreciated by the people who attend. The two chair people this year are Keith Flaherty from Harvard, who's largely has been involved in bringing small molecules and precision medicine into the clinic from the lab, and Christina Curtis, who is actually representing something that we decided to really highlight this year, which is data sciences, which we think has been really poorly represented in most cancer research activities, and needs actually to be better integrated into the field. So having that more prominently displayed at a time when we're going to be attracting 24,000 people should be actually a very productive, we hope will be a very productive enterprise. We do try to make sure that international people are able to attend. It's still a small program. We give out 15 travel awards to early career researchers to help them come. These are people who have submitted an abstract to present at the meeting, that those are reviewed, and then they're selected. Initially, this was for African cancer researchers, but this has now changed. So although over the 15 years, African researchers are the most represented, at this point now, 25% of the people who have been receiving these awards are from Asia right now. AACR has currently 10 journals. We try to cover the broad breadth of cancer research. There are many specialty journals. These are all very relatively high impact journals. As you can see, there are 4 of them with impact factors over 10. So these are areas where your work gets prominent display. We're also looking at bringing in a potentially an 11th journal, which will focus on data sciences. Again, to try to give people whose researchers in computational biology and data science a home for their own research. One of the major activities of AACR is actually to prepare something that's called the AACR Cancer Progress Report. We've been doing this now annually for 13 years. This is really an enormously useful compendium. We not only distribute it in the U.S. to our funders, the politicians, the people in the U.S. Congress, but also distribute it widely. If you go to the AACR website, you can download a copy of this. This really gives you the latest statistics on cancer incidence, mortality, survivorship, and also highlights the latest research and advances in cancer etiology, early detection, diagnosis, treatment, prevention, and survivorship. It's really a very useful compendium to actually go to get actually up-to-date information. So I'm going to now briefly review some of the progress that's been made in the last year. In the last 5 decades, in the United States, we've gone from having 3 million survivors with cancer to 18 million. That's not just about diagnosing more people. That's about the fact that more people with cancer are either surviving free of disease or surviving much longer with disease. And that's really a pretty enormous accomplishment over 5 decades and represents not just efforts in the United States, obviously, but international efforts. There's been a 33% reduction in the overall cancer death rate. That represents about almost 4 million lives that have been saved. And a lot of this reflects the change in the paradigm about how cancer research is done. It used to be something that went from the bench to the bedside, and then people on the bench in laboratories kept working to try to bring things that could be translated. But now things move very rapidly from clinical trials in the bedside from the lab into clinical practice. And the ability to generate high-dimensional data sets by intensely interrogating patients who are treated both on trials and are treated in practice has given us an opportunity to go from bedside and practice back to the bench and do iterative studies that really more rapidly advance, address obstacles, and more rapidly provide solutions to those obstacles. Basic research is really driving progress in precision medicine for lung cancer. We're picking this just because I think it's an area obviously of great importance in China, but around the world. And it's really been a model for how advances in basic cancer research can impact cancer outcomes. So we went from single agent therapies to some of the first targeted drugs, the EGFR inhibitors that came out, and then really targeting more specific mutations as we've learned to be able to sequence tumors in patients. So the ALK inhibitors, and then the specific EGFR inhibitors, MEK and RAF inhibitors, RET inhibitors and MET inhibitors now. And then, of course, the advent of immunotherapy has had an enormous impact on targeting lung cancer and has really changed the survival rate as well as the potential cure rate in patients who present with cancer. So the reduction in overall U.S. cancer mortality has in large part been driven by a decline in the lung cancer death rate. And that's really, the pace of that decline has really changed between 2014 to nearly 5%, actually. There's been major progress in melanoma. It's another model of where progress can really have an impact. Progress in the lab can really have an impact on outcomes. This has been, started with a very targeted drug, vemurafenib, targeting the BRAF mutation that occurs in about 50% of patients with melanoma. But again, now the impact of immunotherapies has had an enormous impact on changing cure rates, which is really different from what's been possible with some of the targeted drugs. And so there's been a dramatic decline in the death rates from melanoma, but there's also been declines in death rates in colorectal cancer, prostate cancer, and female breast cancer because of some of these advances. So 2022 and 2023 has been a remarkable year for approvals from the FDA of new drugs, and the pace is just increasing. There were 14 new anti-cancer therapeutics that were approved for use in standard of care in cancer patients by the FDA. There were 12 previously approved anti-cancer therapeutics that were got expanded use into treating other types of cancers. And there are also 2 new imaging agents, which have really changed potentially the outcome of surgery, for example, by marking where disease is when patients go in to resect, for example, lung cancer with some of the folate staining reagents. We've gone from having 3 pillars of cancer therapy, surgery, radiotherapy, and cytotoxic therapy, to the development in the 1990s and the approval in 2001 of imatinib, of really more precise molecularly targeted therapies. And now we also have more precise immunotherapies with the first really major approval not occurring until 2011 with the approval of CTLA-4 blockade drug, ipilimumab, but now with, as I'll show you, a whole series of more therapies. And these really now are all part of the approach, which is only really expanding our capacity to more specifically treat cancers. One of the hallmark drugs, actually, advances in the last year has really been the ability to target KRAS, which has always been perceived historically as an undruggable drug because there wasn't enough specificity in the active site of KRAS to specifically target it. But advances have really in chemistry have really changed that. So we've gone from, in the 1960s, the discovery of the Kirsten-Rat sarcoma virus, to cloning the gene in that virus in the early 1970s, to cloning human KRAS in 1980s, to ultimately now really being able to identify small molecule drugs that combine into a pocket in KRAS and specifically interfere with activated KRAS. And the most common ones, the two that got approved in the last year, are targeting KRAS G12C mutation. That's the most common mutation in lung cancer. But there are now ones in trials for KRAS G12D, as well as some pan-KRAS inhibitors. And so KRAS has gone from being undruggable to being anything but undruggable. And there are additional strategies, such as using some of the protein post-translational modifier drugs now, that we may really be able to encompass a much wider range of KRAS mutations, as well as other mutations found in cancers. The immunotherapy has, of course, changed dramatically how cancer is treated. This went from the understanding MHC restriction in the early 1970s to cloning CTLA-4 in 1987. But of course, at that time, we knew very little about it. It was actually thought to be a co-stimulatory molecule. It really wasn't until Jim Allison and Jeff Bluestone showed in the 1990s that it was actually, although came from the same family of genes that provide us with co-stimulation through CD28, that it's actually inhibitory. As a consequence, Jim Allison really pushed the development of drugs that would block CTLA-4 to essentially take the brakes off of immune responses. And shortly thereafter, Tasuku Hanjo, who cloned PD-1, collaborated with a series of people, particularly Arlene Sharp and Gordon Freeman at Dana-Farber, to start developing drugs that could inhibit PD-1. Blockade of CTLA-4 got approved in 2011. Blockade of PD-1 got approved only 3 years later. And a drug, the demonstration that LAG-3 was another inhibitory molecule, was documented in 2013, and a drug for that got approved in 2022. So we're seeing this vast array of now drugs that are coming into the clinic, and these are just a small number of the checkpoint inhibitors and co-stimulatory reagents that are really advancing immunotherapy in the clinic. There's been a much faster speed of approval for checkpoint inhibitors. There was a lot of anxiety at the beginning because blocking checkpoints was causing autoimmunity in patients. We had to learn how to control that. But as that started being understood, these drugs got approved for more and more diseases. And in 2023, you can see there's actually more than 20 different diseases now for which checkpoint blockade is an approved therapy. So we're really seeing essentially a whole new array of immunotherapies that are approved in the clinic. Now, there are other areas of T-cell therapy that are really important, of immunotherapy that are important, and the area that my own lab is involved in is adoptive T-cell therapies. CAR therapies became evident as a strategy for genetically engineering T-cells to treat cancer. In 2017, the first one got approved for treatment of B-cell lymphoma, and very shortly thereafter, similar drugs got approved for targeting somewhat different molecules, or with different targeting molecules for B-cell leukemias, and then multiple myeloma, And now there's an enormous effort, obviously, trying to find ways to treat solid tumors with reagents such as CAR T cells. Now, there are some limitations for CAR T cells, and my lab has been really focused on using TCR-based strategies rather than CAR-based strategies because T cells actually function much better through TCRs. They're more sensitive for recognizing targets. And what we've been working on to try to get responses that could be sustained in tumors is to engineer a more coordinated response. So we can isolate CD8 T cells that recognize and kill tumors. We can get the TCR from that. We can engineer CD8 T cells to recognize that antigen by expressing the TCR in there, and they will kill the tumor. But the problem is that if they don't completely eliminate the tumor ultimately exhausts those CD8 T cells, and you can't sustain the response in the context of most solid tumors. And part of that is because a coordinated CD4 and CD8 T cell response is generally required to have a sustained response. So we've been now engineering CD4 cells to work in concert with CD8 T cells. Now you could do that because CD4 cells usually see a different antigen, but we've been engineering CD4 cells to see the exact same antigen, so we can use the same receptor in a CD4 T cell to see the tumor. That triggers CD4 cells. It doesn't usually have high enough avidity in a CD4 cell to mediate a truly functional response. But if you also express CD8 alpha beta in CD4 cells, it winds up with similar avidity for the tumor as CD8 T cells. That can give you a response that can work. But if you actually also put in an immunomodulatory fusion protein that provides co-stimulation at CD4 cell, you can expand CD8 T cells, sustain their activity, and even those CD4 cells can actually directly kill the tumor. And I can tell you that we've already gotten FDA approval to initiate a trial with TCR engineered CD8 and CD4 cells targeting a KRAS mutation, G12V, in patients who are HLA-A11, which is actually quite common in the Asian population. So it would be quite useful, I think, in China and in the surrounding areas. And additionally, we have another trial that will include the TCRs and CD8 alpha beta as well as a immunomodulatory fusion protein to provide co-stimulation. So I'm sorry, I couldn't help but digress a little in my own work. So there's been a new wave of T-cell engaging bispecific antibodies that's also out, but there are a lot of challenges. And some of these challenges are the fact that we have to address some of the disparities. We know that there are higher cancer death rates in poorly or socioeconomic groups. We know that, for example, Asian individuals have a higher incidence of gastric cancer. Part of this is H. pylori. Part of it may be something in addition to that. We need to better understand that. And we know that that patients in rural areas are much less, are very underserved and have a much higher death rate. So we need to actually spread cancer, make things more available. We know that there's been uneven progress against other cancer types. The incidence of some cancers are rising in the U.S., particularly uterine, pancreatic, and early onset colorectal cancer. We are not quite sure why colorectal cancer is increasing in younger populations. We think that this may reflect changes in the microbiome, the increased use of antibiotics, but also factors like obesity. But these are all areas that need to be addressed. We know that there's also a looming cancer crisis around the world. The projection of cancer cases and cancer deaths between now and 2040 represents an enormous increase. Much of this is going to be in areas of the world that have lower human development indexes, and we need to make sure that we can spread cancer therapies to those countries as well, so that we can actually impact the global burden of cancer. Looking to the future, we know there's a lot of exciting opportunities for innovation in cancer research and care. There's a whole new wave of technologies coming. We know we need to figure out how to better target the microbiome. There's patient-centric cancer medicine, new approaches in immunotherapy, pre-cancer atlas, and a new age in combination therapies, particularly using reagents like synthetic lethality. We can talk about that in the panel. AACR is trying to serve as a catalyst for bringing people together to accelerate cancer research through collaboration and enhance the delivery of the products of cancer research to a broader population of people. So thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Greenberg. Just to report, we have over 7 million viewers online. So we surpassed the last year's number, but the numbers are still growing very fast. AACI has always been a prominent force in driving the translation of lab research findings into clinical medicines. And as you just mentioned, Professor Greenberg, a record number of drugs has been approved, and they're clearly benefiting the survival of cancer patients in the U.S. But I think the disparity in the U.S. as well as globally is very clear as well. We just got a question, actually 2 questions from the same person, the ambassador of Pakistan to the United Nations, asking about how can we solve this problem. So this is a great segue to our next keynote speaker, Dr. Schuchter, who is a current president of ASCO, and he's also my neighbor. He's at UPenn. So she's going to talk about the role of ASCO in improving cancer care. Lynn, please.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, clear.
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this wonderful invitation, and it really is an honor to join all of you, my colleagues based in the United States and in China. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Yes, I'm Lynn Schuchter, and I am a medical oncologist, and my own work focuses on melanoma. And I'm going to share with you some updates about ASCO and how we can work together. What I love about tonight's session is that this is a global effort, and it will take all of us to really make an impact and really decrease deaths from cancer. This slide shows you our ASCO membership. So ASCO is the American Society of Clinical Oncology. I hope that most on this call are familiar with this professional organization. We are an oncology organization that really includes medical oncologists, surgical oncologists, radiation oncologists. I love Dr. Pham's comments about the holistic multidisciplinary approach. And that certainly is true for ASCO. It really takes a team. It also takes pharmacists and nurses and patient advocates to really tackle the problem of cancer. And we have members from all these disciplines. There are roughly 50,000 members that are part of ASCO, 2/3 based in the U.S., but a growing population internationally. And we welcome really everyone's participation. Recently, ASCO updated its 5-year strategic plan, and our mission and our core values hasn't really changed. Our goal, like everyone on this call, is really to advance equity in cancer care and improve the outcomes for patients with cancer. But we've modified these goals over this past year, really looking at a focus on access. And so that is to remove barriers and promote access to high quality, equitable care. This has been touched on already tonight. But all these advances that we are going to share tonight can't be applied if we don't get patients into the door and get the available treatment. This is also a challenging field, and we want to enhance the professional well-being. We have seen many cancer physicians leaving clinical-facing positions, in part driven by the pandemic. And so an important part of the work that we're doing is to really ensure a really healthy clinical and research environment. We want to make research easier. We want to, lead to more drug approvals, as Dr. Greenberg touched on, and for ASCO to be a trusted source of reliable information for all of you. You are aware of our flagship programs here, including work that we do in the area of clinical research. I'm going to talk about our grants program, our meetings, and our journals, which I'm not going to go into, but the Journal of Clinical Oncology is the main journal for ASCO. I also want to recognize our collaborators in China, and just a special call out to our colleagues at CACA and Chinese Society of Clinical Oncology. So this has been great. We have joint sessions with your professional societies. We plan activities, our annual meeting. We've been working on joint projects, and we have shared commitment to mentorship and opportunities for training and professional development. So thank you for your ongoing collaboration. Over the past 5 years, ASCO, really in part because of our interest to have a global impact, has begun what we call regional councils. And these are across the world, but this includes Asia. And the purpose of our regional councils is to really better collaborate with our regional professional societies to really understand the needs of cancer patients and cancer providers in different regions, to talk about ways to adapt, as you talked about, guidelines that may be more relevant in different settings, and really to learn about what are the most important factors in a particular region. This shows you the makeup of our Asia Pacific Council, and we're really pleased that Dr. Chun Lu is a participant in the Asia Medical Regional Council. And this has been mainly meeting virtually, but also we've had in-person meetings, and it's been very robust conversations, and it's been very interesting to learn about, as you pointed out, the differences in the incidence, the drivers between different types of cancer, and how to best intervene, especially with guidelines and access to new treatments. This just shows you the class meeting, and we have representatives from China mainland with Dr. Jia, and from China, Hong Kong with Dr. Li and Molly Lee. So thank you so much. One of the really important things that I'm highlighting here is ASCO's Leadership Development Program. And this is a great way for young oncologists, those starting their careers or mid-career, to develop those additional leadership skills that they can take back home and help to improve their own research programs in their own region. And so it is a very focused leadership development program. And one of the initiatives that our regional council started was that they identified this as a key priority for their young physicians. So we're really excited about this. As I said, part of it is virtual. Most of it is virtual, but it allows for really close mentorship. People come with projects. And so I really welcome those that are joining us to get engaged and to apply for one of these opportunities. I also want to highlight that Conquer Cancer is ASCO's mechanism for giving grants. We've awarded over $187 million to grants. These are career development awards. They are YIA Young Investigator Awards. A new category is the Global YIA. And a nice way that young physicians have gotten engaged with ASCO and have gotten their first grant funding is through the IDEA program, and that also focuses on palliative care and symptom management. So these have different deadlines. You see the stage here when we were presenting at our annual meeting. But I would ask you to go to the website, look at these opportunities, and please apply. I think this is a great way to foster the careers and to advance your own research and what you're interested in. I'm going to just briefly touch on oncology innovations. I feel like it's good to celebrate at the end of the year. Dr. Greenberg touched on some of this, but my own area is in melanoma. And I just want to say that I didn't think in my lifetime I would see the kind of advances that we've seen in the treatment of melanoma, where we really had no effective treatment, and patients with stage 4 melanoma, not a common disease that you see, but melanoma that if it travels to distant sites really had no cure. And now, with the advent of so many new treatments, we are seeing real cures of patients. And so I had a very busy clinic yesterday, and many patients with stage 4 melanoma, even that had metastasized to the brain, who are disease-free and cured even 8 years later. So this application of basic science discoveries to the development of new treatments, I feel every day in my practice. So some of the top innovations, and Dr. Greenberg and I are really touching on similar, is precision medicine, molecularly targeted therapy. And because of time, I'll go a little bit faster. But again, we have patients that are joining this call tonight. You see a PET scan, and those black dots represent metastatic cancer that has traveled throughout the body. And by applying a pill that precisely targets a specific mutation, in this case BRAF, you see that next PET scan that shows almost a complete response to treatment. And we see this kind of response within days of starting the treatment. But what is real, and this slide shows you the different available treatments, and the newer generations of these have led to more affinity for the mutated kinase, maybe fewer side effects. But really the key here, and what you all touched on earlier, is the necessity that when appropriate, patients really need to have the molecular testing, the somatic mutation testing done. And it's very specific for each stage of cancer, which patients really need this testing. And, ASCO is supporting a number of research projects. I'm sure you are too, about what is the feasibility of more efficient testing, making sure that this information is available in order to select treatment. And increasingly, this can be done on a small amount of tumor tissue. It can be done with blood samples. And so this promise of molecular profiling has made a huge difference. You heard about it in lung cancer as well. But unless patients have the sampling done and have the testing done, they're not able to get access to these treatments. Similarly, you've already touched on immunotherapy, so I'm not going to go over that in any big way. But again, we've applied this in melanoma with great success. This next slide shows, again, numerous approvals, more than 11 in the United States from the FDA of PD-1, PD-L1 antibodies, and now LAG-3. You also have your own PD-1 agents that you've developed. And I want to just say that I am humbled every day by the toxicity of these agents. And again, I really appreciated the comments about holistic, integrated approach. Last week, one of my patients developed type 1 diabetes from getting immunotherapy, PD-1 antibody, in the adjuvant setting. So they didn't have cancer. We're trying to prevent a recurrence. This is a devastating toxicity, lifelong toxicity. So importantly, we are weighing the risks and the benefits of each of these treatments and applying them, in the appropriate setting. But it has led to dramatic improvement in cancer outcome and even curing types of cancer that we didn't previously think could be cured. There is a blast of information in terms of AI and machine learning. Again, I'm just going to be very brief, but it is the pace of AI in just publications, manuscript, and real-world use of this technology has been quite astonishing. It's going to be, I think, incredibly helpful. Already been shown to be helpful in, radiology imaging. Maybe it's going to be helpful in drug, identifying new targets. We think it's going to be easier in the clinic as we adopt these new strategies in order to make care for patients easier. It's just interesting that Julie Graylow, who's the Chief Medical Officer for ASCO, was preparing for a talk, and she just put into ChatGPT, what should I tell oncologists about the future of oncology care? And in 5 seconds, it led to what you see here. But it really is what we all are seeing: the application of genomic and molecular profiling, integration of immunotherapy, hopefully the use of AI to improve, as we say, the more holistic care and addressing all the components of what a patient may need going through a cancer journey. But we need to really understand this technology. There is great promise, but we are also concerned about the perils, the limits. There are issues with the algorithms and what was the data used to establish these. So we have established a task force at ASCO looking at AI. It is the focus of our March retreat. We have a number of topics at the ASCO annual meeting. And again, we want to fully understand, yes, the benefits, but also what are the perils of using this new technology. And finally, oncology innovation really requires equitable access to clinical trials. And so this is one of the major efforts of ASCO is how can we help people with cancer get greater access to clinical trials so that everyone can benefit. And we certainly had a lot of learnings during the COVID pandemic about what we could do to make it easier to continue clinical trials. And the FDA in the US allowed us to handle visits differently. We did more remote visits through telehealth. We did virtual visits. We minimized the data collection. And so, maybe we'll talk more about this in the Q&A section, but we think this is a really essential work that we all need to work together on. We have a paper that's about to come out. Maybe it was out today or tomorrow, but it's ASCO's call to action to really address this, and especially focusing on decentralization. And so our patients, are not all at academic medical centers. In the United States, less than 10% of adult patients enroll on clinical trials. We need clinical trials in the community where the patients are. We need community-based oncologists to be able to participate. So there's a number of points in this call to action paper. To really much of our comments are directed to the FDA, but also some to industry about how to make this less burdensome for all, less expensive, and faster. And then just two more things. Every year, the ASCO president is able to pick a presidential theme. And my theme is the art and science of cancer care from comfort to cure. And with this theme, yes, I'm emphasizing, which I've discussed tonight, the great science that has led to so many cures. But also at the same time, we need to recognize that not all patients are benefiting from these new treatments. These treatments sometimes work and then stop working. And so importantly about the art of cancer care, providing care to patients when they may be at the end of life, talking about palliative care, symptom management, and sometimes hospice care. And a focus at this annual meeting will be really integration of communication skills, really to help providers, have these difficult conversations. How do we know what our patients' priorities are? What are their values so that we are giving, the appropriate treatment and we're providing the right support throughout the cancer journey. And then I would like to invite all of you to ASCO Breakthrough. This is a relatively new meeting for ASCO. It's going to be held again in Yokohama, Japan, and I hope that you can all join us. We had good support from CACA and from many of you and had participants. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions during the Q&A. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Professor Schuchter. It is grateful to hear from a clinical oncologist in terms of your own experience, how the innovations has impacted our cancer treatment and how they have impacted on cancer patients. And also, I want to thank you for implementing and sharing your mentorship, because you are well known for your mentorship for young investigators and oncologists. And thank you for broadening it to a global scale. So great, thank you. Now we will invite first time for this event representatives from American Cancer Society. We have Chief Scientific Officer of ACS, Dr. William Dahut. And his presentation is going to be a patient-centric approach to cancer research. Dr. Dahut.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today. It's really an honor, and it's wonderful hearing my colleagues from AACR and ASCO, having been a longtime member of both organizations, and hearing such a consensus about what needs to be done. So I'm going to talk a little bit about American Cancer Society. We're a little bit different. We're not a professional organization. Patients are really the heart of who we are. We have great respect for the cancer researchers and the clinical oncologists, having been both myself. So we all work together to help patients, but really the core of who we are patients. So on to the next slide. So we really exist because, the burden of cancer is unacceptably too high. There are just too many folks diagnosed with cancer, too many people dying from the disease. So that's really what continues to drive us. Next slide. So this is our numbers. It was mentioned earlier on, every year in January, our researchers actually present data on cancer statistics. Yeah, we have also global data, but this is our annual U.S. data. Last year, estimated nearly 2 million new cases per year. This year, probably over 2 million, and about 600 new deaths per year. Look at the relative risk of other deaths continually driven by lung cancer, but as I mentioned earlier, lung cancer deaths are falling, I think, due to both screening as well as better therapies, with incidence greatest in prostate and breast cancer. Next slide. We have a really integrated approach for our to treating folks with cancer. I lead our discovery pillar. We're the largest nonprofit funder of cancer research in the U.S., outside the U.S. government. Currently have about $445 million out in grants. We funded about, over $3 billion in grants, since the early 90s. But we also have work in advocacy where we can actually work on behalf of patients. As mentioned earlier on, the importance of biomarkers. We're advocating for biomarker bills, so insurance will actually cover genetic testing and genomics of tumors, and also patient support. We're really boots on the ground work, where we actually have people who will drive people to appointments, 800 numbers, and also folks where places where patients can stay for free. And the core of what we have is equity in cancer for everybody. Next slide. So in my discovery pillar, listening, what are sort of our priorities? And one is, impactful cancer research in underfunded areas, trying to go to areas where government, and particularly NCI and DOD, is not funding well. Of course, right now, nothing is being funded that well. With a focus on earlier probably of the cancer continuum, more on screening, early detection, cancer prevention, and cancer recurrence. Healthcare implementation is important. Continued focus on expanding our next generation of scientists. We have a new impact initiative in prostate cancer based on data showing an increased number of men presenting with advanced disease. More work on DEI, and considering accelerated bench-to-bedside work, particularly with early-stage investigators. Next slide. And this is kind of a little bit how we're broken down administratively, whether it's extramural discovery science, which is really our grant size. We have an ACS Center for Diversity and Research Training, which funds high school students, summer interns, as well as postbacks. And we have an intramural program, which includes our surveillance health equity science, which is a lot of statistics you heard earlier on, our large population science group, which really has very large cohort studies, hundreds of thousands of subs we follow over time, early detection science, which is really also our guidelines, which we actually updated lung cancer this year. Was mentioned earlier on, guidelines should be different from perhaps in China than the US, and we actually think guidelines should be different even from amongst patients, which should be precision-based, and we also have a business operations group. Next slide. So we do fund research across the cancer continuum. We do basic science, preclinical research, and clinical research. Next slide. And then this is sort of an example of our typical funding cycle. This was the grants funded this last cycle, about $64.5 million over 31 states, 31 different types of cancers. You see sort of the breakdown. Again, more and more, we'd like to do more earlier on in cancer discovery, earlier on in looking at areas of cancer prevention and screening, the science of those areas. But as you can see, we're every cancer and also, non-specific biology work in cancer. Next slide. We've had 50 Nobel Prize winners that we've funded over time. We're very proud just to have our first woman researcher funded by ACS to win this award. I think what was really striking when Dr. Bertozzi, who's a chemist by nature, when she came up and told us that really she had her postdoc award from ACS because we would fund biology and a chemist, and then also her first PI award. So she said without that sort of early stage sort of ability to go outside her field, she would not have been able to actually do the work she's doing, which is now actually has clinical impact potentially here at bioorthogonal reactions. Next slide. We also have a tremendous emphasis on funding women scientists. There's some examples of women scientists in our researchers program, where we pick out 4 every funding cycle, looking at sort of diverse populations from sort of the bench to the bedside, and also in population sciences, as well as in prevention. So again, we're very proud of our ability to really drive the careers of women scientists. Next slide. So we've had some new innovation programs. One I mentioned, next slide. One I mentioned here was our ACS Center for Diversity and Cancer Research Center. We really think it's incredibly important we give increased opportunities for folks who would not necessarily have thought of science as a career. So starting early on, it's a very small high school program, but then working with the cancer centers, our internship program, and we're very excited about our postbac program. We've funded 32 postbacs the first year, additional 40 this year. We think that's really that key time when folks who are doing their data science, population science, or bench-based science, or even clinical research can actually develop a cancer research focus and then have an impact, whether once they go on to medical school or graduate school. Next slide. We also have journals, as mentioned by the other speakers. Our best-known journals are Cancer and CA. CA has actually had one of the highest impacts factors of all journals, well into the hundreds, really driven by our facts and figures work earlier on in the year, and also a publication in Cancer Cytopathology. Next slide. Surveillance and health equity science, we talked about a little bit. This is our cancer facts and figures. We also publish on screening and risk factor work. We talk about tobacco control research, health services research, and also publish on cancer disparity research. Next slide. And then we have not only our annual facts and figures work, but also do special issues in breast cancer and then subpopulations, whether it's African Americans or Hispanic populations. We do our global cancer facts and figures, as well as disease types and cancer treatment and survivorship. Next slide. So we've had significant global media coverage, which I think is nice. I think we see incredible number of downloads, particularly on our facts and figures work. Online usage on some of our work is about 13,000 unique pages per view per month. You can see global media coverage has been significant on our work. So I think it's really something we're very proud of, that we really have our work that really monitors our cancer incidence mortality in the US, but also worldwide. Next slide. These are our key findings from 2023. I was mentioned a little bit earlier on, cancer mortality based on our research has fallen by 33%. We saw a significant decrease in HPV incidence, largely tied to increased vaccination rate. We did see actually prostate incidence rates rise, but was much more concerning that this was driven by advanced stage disease with tremendous disparity, with Black men being diagnosed about 70% more likely, but 2 to 4 times more likely to die from the disease. Next slide. And so based on this, we've actually driving a particularly large initiative in prostate cancer, the IMPACT Initiative. This was a presentation we did at Howard University just weeks after our data came out, where really we decided to drive this issue home. We had representatives from Congress, the US, as well as multiple people from multiple organizations in the DC area and throughout the cancer continuum. Next slide. This is the data. You can see, tracking somewhat with changes in screening rates. So incidence rates fell, but what has been more concerning is incidence rates are starting to rise, driven really largely by increase in men with advanced disease, and now a total flattening of mortality rates, where mortality rates had fallen by 53%, probably largely due to increased detection, but probably also due to better treatments. But over the last decade, with billions of dollars of new drugs approved, we see mortality levels have now totally flattened across all populations. Next slide. And some of this is driven by less screening. As you look at the number of men who have actually had a PSA test in the last year, 50 years and older, only about 35%, but only about 25% of those men aged 50 to 64. So I think there was a lot of concern about overtreatment I think some of those concerns were certainly justified. We've gotten much better about knowing who can be treated and who can be watched over time. But I think this has driven folks away from finding out they haven't had cancer at all and leading to men presenting with more advanced disease. Next slide. And survivorship is different, not surprisingly, across blacks and whites, not only in symptoms, not only in outcome, but also in symptoms. Seeing black patients, by and large, have had many more symptoms than whites, with the exception of sleep disturbances and fatigue. Next slide. And next slide, we'll just move on, and we'll skip this too. Next slide. So again, one thing was mentioned earlier on by several folks about the lack of diversity in clinical trials. Really, though, we've been talking about this now for about 30 years. We really have not made significant impact in this. This looks at the number of representation of racial ethnicities in prostate cancer clinical trials over time. And as you can see, decade by decade, we really haven't made the impact that we want. And actually, 96% of participants are white, and participants from Caribbean and African countries are underrepresented, as well as Asian populations, who are seeing the same significant underrepresentation of populations. And next slide. And so really, one thing we're really trying to drive is increased diversity in prostate cancer clinical trials. We'll have multiple grants going out this year to fund that. Again, trying to, as was mentioned by our esteemed ASCO president, to try to bring these trials into the areas where the patients are, working with the cancer centers, but also working in areas where cancer centers may not be. And as you can see, incidence rates increase, mortality levels falling. And so I think the key to increasing better care is often increasing prostate cancer clinical trial accrual, particularly from those that are represented, have been underrepresented on trials of black males. Next slide. I mentioned earlier on our large cohort studies, the hundreds of thousands of subjects enrolled prior to a cancer diagnosis. The most recent enrolled from 2006. We closed a accrual in 2013. 304,000 participants. We've had about 15 or 20,000 cancer diagnoses, but we have baseline DNA, RNA. We have over time microbiome, complete demographic information, ability to resample patient, tumor blocks, and also tumor imaging. So really, an example to get better idea about what drives cancer and what we can actually learn about which populations are at higher risk, really to hopefully drive precision screening at some point. Next slide. And this gets some ideas, some of the work that's come out of these studies over time, some things and what we can study. This is the tumor tissue I mentioned, the participant portal, the microbiome, an app, and repeat blood work, particularly in those populations we think are at highest risk that do not yet have a cancer diagnosis. Next slide. And some of things we've learned out of these cohorts over time, really landmark linking with smoking and cancer, environmental tobacco, secondhand smoke, air pollution, obesity and cancer risk, red meat linking to colorectal cancer, and also other linkages you can see here from aspirin use, physical activity, as well as weight loss. Next slide. We're launching this year. We've launched it in 2 cities already, in Atlanta and in the Hampton Roads areas. Our newest cohort will be the Voices of Black Women study. This will be 100,000 Black women. 85,000 of them will have not had a cancer diagnosis. 15,000 will be through their adjuvant therapy within the past 2 years of the 3 cancers that are really driving cancer disparities, which are endometrial, colorectal, and breast cancer. We think this will be a study that will probably never been repeated. But again, the ability to learn about what drives cancer in this population and also look at what we see in cancer recurrence, we think is really critical information. And this is something we'd love to collaborate with. And this is sort of our pathway forward. On to our next slide. And then the last few things we want to talk about is, our screening guidelines. We really come up with guideline development, screening guidelines. We've moved now to a living guideline model as opposed to sort of changing guidelines every 5 years. So when there's new information that comes out, we will do a shorter review and update our guidelines only in those areas that need to be updated. Next slide. And I think what's most important, this year we came out with updated lung cancer screening guidelines. And the most important change with this is we removed the year since quit criteria. The prior criteria was that if you're 15 years out from smoking, you no longer needed to be screened. What we had based on data with that was the exact age when cancer incidence was going up. So this simplifies things a little bit. So if someone has had at least a 20-pack year of history of smoking and at least 50 years of age, then one should be screened Screening rates are incredibly low in this country. In some states, California and Utah, only about 2 to 3%. Overall, nationally, well under 10%. So, to increase cancer outcomes, we really need to increase screening rates. And then ultimately also look at screening from populations who are not smokers, whether it's inherited germline abnormalities or whether it's exposure. So that's something that may come up in our question and answers. Next slide. Again, we have other guidelines coming out in the following year: breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colorectal in a very high-risk population. Next slide. And I did want to the next slide, talk a little bit about, I think our concerns about what's going on as far as federal funding of cancer research. It's been critical as far as making advances. The research that was talked about, the clinical care that was talked about, has been very dependent on federal funding, and we're at a very vulnerable time period. Next slide. You can look at the NCI budget over time, but if you look at actual buying power, you can see even though the dollar amount has gone up significantly, funding for the NCI has not really kept pace with cost in the cancer community. And during that time, we've had significant increase in those folks who want to work on science, and which has really had a significant decrease actually in the NCI pay line and funding rates. And you can actually see, look at the R01 applications increasing compared to the number of NCI budget numbers. So it's really a vulnerable time for new scientists in cancer research. The next slide. So ACS has actually prided ourselves on funding new investigators with a budget perhaps 10% of what the NCI is funding. We fund a significant number of R01 equivalents at first time of funding period. So again, we are very proud of being in that space. We certainly cannot make up for any NCI shortfalls, but we actually continue to want to come up with more and innovative ways to fund early scientific investigators. Next slide. And, we really want to work with our partners here throughout the world and on the call today to really ensure continued funding for science in the U.S. and worldwide. We're working with our advocacy arm to mitigate this as much as possible, but flat or decreased funding would have a significant impact on our community. And then we're working on innovative funding strategies to help minimize this, but of course we cannot make up for significant shortfalls, certainly by ourselves. Next slide. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the question and answers that come up during the panel period.
Great, thank you, Dr. Dahut. Patients clearly are the reason why all of us come together to fight cancer, and no single government or agency will be able to fund these efforts singularly. The coordinated and complementing funding efforts will be the solution. So kudos to you and ACS for all your effort and leadership. So now we'll move on to our last keynote speaker, my dear friend, Professor Zhou from Shanghai Pulmonary Hospital, Tongji University. Professor Zhou.
Good morning to Chinese colleagues. Good evening to United States expert. It's really my great honor to discuss with you on treatment of advanced non-small cell lung cancer in China. Where are we now and to go? Actually, I'm kind of medical oncologist only do lung cancer. I kind of stupid. So I like to focus on the talk on the treatment in advanced stage of lung cancer. The treatment advanced stage of lung cancer is compatible between China and the United States. We have our own guidelines, CISCO guidelines, CACA guidelines, and also NCCN guidelines. Many years ago, we know that lung cancer is not one entity of disease. It could be further divided into several subsets according to oncogenic drivers. We have EGFR, ALK, ROS1, and etc. as mentioned only. Against these biomarkers, we developed targeted therapy for EGFR or for ALK. We have first gen, second gen, and third gen tyrosine kinase inhibitors. This compound play more and more role in the treatment at advanced stage. About 15 years ago, we published the data of the Optimal study, which is a randomized phase 3 trial comparing first-line olotini versus gem carbo in advanced non-small cell lung cancer with positive EGFR mutation. Primary endpoint was progression-free survival, almost tripled with olotini compared with chemo. Hazard ratio 0.16. The better efficacy with the EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitor was further confirmed by the following study. We have so many third-gen EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitors. This compound proved to be better than first-gen TKI in terms of progression-free survival and tumor response rate. EGFR mutation has many subtypes. We have sensitive EGFR mutation, uncommon mutation, and also EGFR 20 insertions. There are about 120 EGFR 20 insertions. For patients with EGFR 20 insertions are resistant to first-gen, second-gen, even third-gen EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitors. In many countries, these patients are just treated with chemotherapy. Years ago, reported the data of the mobocertinib in the phase 1B and the phase 2 study. The sample size is over 100. We get a kind of good tumor response rate about 30%, progression-free survival 7.3 months, overall survival is about 24 months. The result of the study leading to approval of the mobocertinib as second-line treatment for advanced non-small cell lung cancer with 20 insertions in the United States and also in China. This year, Dr. Wang from Beijing reported results of Wukong 6. The study focused on the efficacy savolitinib in the EGFR 20 insertions. Eligible patients has been treated with chemotherapy and were enrolled in the study and given the savolitinib 300 milligrams per day up to disease progression or intolerable toxicity. The primary endpoint of the study is overall response rate by BICA. This slide just shows waterfall plot of the study. Very good. The waterfall plot study, majority of patients develop kind of tumor shrinkage. Progression-free tumor response rate is about 61%. Progression-free survival is about 6.5 months. So the result of the study leading to approval savolitinib as second-line treatment for advanced non-small cell lung cancer with 20 insertions. Mobocertinib and savolitinib only produce about 6 to 7 months of progression-free survival. Definitely, this compound could not be used in first-line setting. We need better compounds. Now we have amivantamab. The compound has been approved in the United States for the second-line treatment of the EGFR 20 insertions. The compound could block signaling pathway of EGFR as well as MET. The compound also can attract macrophage and NK cells to the tumor cells, then kill the tumor cells. We do have some data to show that amivantamab and chemotherapy are synergistic in anti-cancer activities. So we initiate the phase 3 trial, Papillon. This slide just shows design of trial. The patient with chemo-naive EGFR 20 insertions were randomized at a 1-to-1 ratio to receive amivantamab plus chemo versus chemo alone. The primary point of study is progression-free survival by BICA. The patient assigned to chemo arm will now cross over to receive the second-line amivantamab monotherapy. The data of the study was just published in the New England Journal of Medicine. This slide just shows the efficacy parameters of the study. Primary endpoint progression-free survival was significantly prolonged from 6.7 months to 11.4 months, hazard ratio 0.395, significant p-value. The combination also significantly improves the duration of response, tumor response rate, and also progression-free survival too. Improvement of the progression-free survival too strongly suggests the combination should be used in first-line setting. After EGFR, ALK translocation is important oncogenic drivers. For this, the target we develop first-gen, second-gen, and third-gen ALK inhibitors. Last year, we reported the data of the AACR, which is a randomized phase 3 trial compared first-line alectinib versus quizartinib in the Asian population with positive ALK. Progression-free survival was significantly improved with alectinib compared with quizartinib, 42 months versus 11 months. Again, overall survival was not mature in alectinib arm. We do observe kind of very good progression 5-year survival rate, 66%, suggesting the advanced patients with positive ALK could become a kind of blocking disease. In Crohn's study, we found third-gen lorlatinib does better than quizartinib. The therapy associated with better efficacy in terms of progression-free survival, also brain mets control. Recently, we reported the results of the Lipitor 431 in New England Journal of Medicine. This slide just shows design of trial. Advanced patient with chemo-naive, RAD-positive non-small cell lung cancer was randomized at 2:1 ratio to receive sabatolimab or chemotherapy. The patient assigned to chemo arm could allow a crossover to receive sabatolimab at the time of disease progression. Progression-free survival is more than doubled in two ITT population. Tumor response rate was higher in the sabatolimab arm versus chemo. The compound could penetrate to the blood-brain barrier, could control the brain mets. So the compound should become the first line of choice for the patient with positive RAD. Targeted therapies demonstrate better efficacy compared with chemo, but we also know that almost all patients will develop acquired resistance. For example, EGFR mutant lung cancer, after first-gen, second-gen therapy, patient will develop the secondary mutation, EGFR T790 mutation, MET application, and then essential. The patient treated with third-gen, there are so many the acquired resistance mechanism. So after failure of TKI, the tumor become even more complicated and heterogeneous in biology. At this time, it's impossible to cure our patients. So how can we improve efficacy? We should look at the surviving signals for the persistent cells after TKI. If we understand surviving signals, maybe we can develop the combination strategy for our patients. In our daily practice, we trial several combinations, try to improve efficacy of the tyrosine kinase inhibitors in the population, such as EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitor plus chemotherapy, plus bevacizumab, plus immunotherapy, radiotherapy by specific ADC and essential. We know that the TKI plus chemo only improve progression-free survival, but not PFS2 and overall survival. The TKI plus bevacizumab only improve progression-free survival. We cannot get any survival benefit in terms of overall survival. So how about to combine with immunotherapy? Recently, we reported results in Part 151. This slide just shows design of trial. Eligible patients previously treated with EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitor or ALK were randomized through 1-to-1 ratio to receive atezolizumab, bevacizumab, or chemo, or to receive the placebo plus bevacizumab plus chemo. The primary endpoint was progression-free survival by investigators. The study was designed to show efficacy of the immunotherapy in patients with positive EGFR or ALK. Primary endpoint is here. You can see that two curves was kind of separated, but the p-value was not significant. Hazard ratio 0.84. In this study, about 52% of patients are found to have positive EGFR ALK. When we look at this subgroup patients, you can see two curves of progression-free survival are almost overlapped together. Median progression-free survival is the same. So I would say that in EGFR mutant or ALK positive non-small cell lung cancer, there is no position or role of the immunotherapy. Recently, we have the data reported in ESMO Mariposa. In this study, that we use AMI plus sodium EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitor lazertinib versus osimertinib and lazertinib. The combination significantly improved progression-free survival, hazard ratio 0.737, significant p-value, but we need to look at which subgroup patient could get better efficacy from the combination. In our team, we try to find the better combination for EGFR mutant lung cancer. We perform a kind of the multiple arms phase 2 study, the sodium TKI plus bispecific EGFR HER3, EGFR HER3 ADC, FAK inhibitor, and bispecific EGFR CD3. We try to pick up one arm with better efficacy to move forward to do the phase 3 trial. For those without oncogenic driver, immunotherapy becomes standard of care. This slide just demonstrates the better efficacy of the PD-1, PD-L1 monotherapy compared with chemotherapy in terms of tumor response rate, progression-free survival, as well as overall survival. The PD-L1 high population is quite small. In Chinese population, only about 15%. For patients with active EGFR ALK and the PD-L1 low or active population, we recommend the chemo plus IO. We need four randomized phase 3 trial comparing PD-1 or PD-L1 plus chemo versus placebo plus chemo. We do get positive results. Tumor response rate was improved, progression-free survival was longer, overall survival was significantly improved. This slide just shows the long-time survival of our study chemo, the pembrolizumab plus chemo produced about the 16% 4 years progression-free survival, 37% 4 years survival, very good results. In a few months, we will report the 5-year survival rate of the trial. So that slide tells us that the immunotherapy is standard for PD-1 high population. Immune plus chemo is standard for all comers. But I would like to say that the immunotherapy plus chemo, reach a new plateau in efficacy. Overall survival 2 years, 5 years survival rate 16 to 32%. How we can further improve efficacy of the immunotherapy in lung cancer? We need novel compound. We have the TIGIT antibody, we have CD4 antibody, we have EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitor, we have ADC, we have vaccines, cell therapy, and insectual. We tried so many trials, but we got a lot of failure. What a pity. So in our center, we just performed the basket study. We according to expression of PD-L1, we use different treatment strategy. For patient with PD-1 high, we try to use PD-1 antibody as control, a PD-1 antibody plus next-3 antibody, the PD-1 antibody plus anti-OX40 antibody. For PD-1 no or negative, we use the PD-1 plus chemo, PD-1 plus chemo plus next-3, PD-1 plus chemo plus X40. Try to pick one arm to do the phase 2 study. Now we have a novel the immune checkpoint inhibitors, HPK, HKP1. This just shows the global phase 1 study. We will have data in a few months. In China, we have so many bispecifics. The bispecifics could be divided into cell bridging and antigen cross-linking. Recently, we report the data of phase 2 study on AK112 in JTO. AK112 is bispecific, targeting PD-1 and VEGF. The study used AK112 as monotherapy. We get very good tumor response rate, that's 6%. In PD-1 high population, 77%. Progression-free survival is over 1 year. Very encouraging results. Need us to do the randomized phase 3 trial, AK112 versus pembrolizumab in patients with positive PD-L1. The study just finished recruitment. We will have the data very soon in a few months. We try to do the bispecific combination and plus chemo to try to further improve efficacy. This just shows the design multi-center phase 2 study in the squamous cohort, non-squamous cohort, AK112 plus AK104. AK104 is bispecific against PD-1 and CTLA-4. We try to use more or target to further improve efficacy. We also try to use a combination to overcome acquired resistance to PD-1 or PD-L1 inhibitors. So for immunotherapy, the key question need to answer, what's the true mechanism of immune escape in advanced non-small cell lung cancer? What's the molecular mechanism associated with primary resistance or acquired resistance to immunotherapy? So in conclusion, in China, precision medicine improves outcome of lung cancer patients. Before we start therapy, we need molecular profile testing. That's really important. Molecular testing is recommended in China, such as the EGFR, ALK, ROS1, RET, MET, the BRAF, NTRK, KRAS, and the insectual. Target therapy is recommended as first-line treatment, but we do observe primary acquired resistance. Immunotherapy model or immunotherapy plus chemo is standard care for advanced non-small cell lung cancer without oncogenic drivers. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I'd like to stop here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Professor Zhou, for your discussion, and congratulations, you and your colleagues, in terms of all the progress you made for patients with non-small cell lung cancer. Now I'm very happy to report that we are over 10 million. We're over 10 million viewers online live. So this is a tremendous. So thank you so much for all the speakers. Now we'll move on to the panel discussion. It is my honor to invite my good friend, Professor Ruihua Xu, who is the Vice President of China Anti-Cancer Association. He's medical oncologist and he's president of Sun University Cancer Center. Professor Xu, would you please to kick off our discussion by asking the first question, please?
Sure. Thank me. So we just had 4 leading keynote speakers have done excellent presentation from the 4th largest oncology society. So Dr. Fan to focus on in the developing country, billions of population country, how to holistic integrate management of patients, so that standardized or treatment. And Dr. Greenberg from the AACR, so focus on the cancer research, like the immunotherapy development. And Dr. Schuchter from the ASCO, so how to develop the clinical trials to improve our treatment. And Dr. Dahut from the ACS to how to screen, improve the early detection. Dr. Zhou also to emphasize focus on the non-small cell lung cancer, especially from the Chinese experience. So very hopeful for the society. So I would like to have a question for the panelists to discuss. How can we collaborate internationally to ensure the global relevance of locally generated data from clinical trials? So we know we have so many unmet clinical needs, so many the clinical trials ongoing or finished. But how to translate or interpret those, especially from the local trials result, into the globally relevance, like the improvement in the cancer diagnosis, treatment, or surveillance. So first of all, I would like to get the opinion from the states. Dr. Lynn, Schuchter. Thank you.
Sure, I'll start. I think this is really important that we could do more global clinical trials. One of the big issues is the regulatory environment, and the idea of harmonizing the regulations and understanding what is required for endpoints that we could all agree upon, so that the goal would be that we're doing the pivotal phase 3 trials that would lead to regulatory approval around the world. I mean, even right now, it's not consistent across Europe and the United States or Canada, and I'm sure there's differences in terms of Asian agencies as well. In the chat, someone asked the question, and some of the regulatory bodies are also really looking at the impact of the clinical benefit in terms of saying that we would lead to FDA approval or drug approval in terms of really impacting overall survival. So I would say that what I am seeing on ASCO, ESMO, AACR, CACA, that the professional societies are working to bring the relevant stakeholders to the table to harmonize the rules and regulations so that industry is able to conduct studies worldwide and know that when they're opening a study in one country, they're following the rules around the world. We at ASCO and partnering with many organizations here have worked hard on looking at eligibility criteria to make a broader eligibility requirements so that more patients are eligible for clinical trials. So I think there are ways of us looking at the rules and regulations to have them more harmonized to enhance global enrollment. I mean, that's what industry wants. I mean, from our perspective, they still fund the majority of the clinical trials that are done in the United States. And so we rely upon this partnership and making it easier worldwide. I know they feel is mission critical as well.
Mhm.
I mean, it's expensive and they're interested in shorter time to completion of a study.
Yes, actually, so I appreciate one sentence from your presentation. So you said that people with cancer should have equal access to the clinical trials. So this is a very good, but big chance for the cancer patient. So very good. So I would like to get some opinion from other, from Dr. Greenberg, Dr.
Well,
Hall, or Dr. Fan.
I think Lynn hit most of the critical issues. I think the other issue is actually standardization of data acquisition and data access. I think that if we, particularly with the potential now to get very high dimensional data sets analyzing outcomes or impact of an intervention, I think it's going to be really critical that internationally that there's some standardization of that so that essentially data obtained in trials that are not held in your own country, you can access the data and interpret the data in the same context you're interpreting data from your own trials. So I think some agreement on how we can do that and making sure that the assays are standardized would go a long way to making results in different countries utilizable in other countries.
And just to
Very good.
add,
Yeah.
as we think about in our call to action, just as you said, Dr. Greenberg, like just taking imaging that is done across centers, that can be uploaded, that can be centrally reviewed. I mean, that doesn't require on-site people to review the response rates. I mean, there should be technology that makes this so much faster and easier, like just the endpoint of response. We could do a lot.
Well, actually, I have one question for you. For targeted therapy, if the target is very clear, we have enough biology to show the targeted therapy works in the patient with positive target. So if the study was just performed in the Asian country, China or Japan, we get very positive results. Do you think we need the big study in Europe or America? So I do think the target should be easily transferred from one study to another countries.
Thank you.
I think that's true, but I think it will depend on the quality of the data that documents that. And I think that so that it's not just the acquisition of the data, but also that other places have access to review the data. I think that those are going to be important components for trials being done outside the country being useful in country.
Yeah, one thing that we've talked about is doing, parallel trials. This is more when I had my NCI, I had on parallel trials in different countries, essentially the exact same trials, because oftentimes you run into different regulatory issues between the FDA, the Chinese regulatory, or Europe. But if the exact same trial is done in the same eligibility, same criteria, different places, the trials are written to merge the data at the end, and particularly then if pathology and imaging can be shared centrally, I think there's a way that you can merge data in a way it's easier than trying to always have them all on one study, because then it just becomes more complicated. But it is really important, I think, to look at populations that are different, because response rate, toxicities can be very different, certainly based on obviously SNPs or other factors which lead to drug metabolism factors. So it is very conceivable that a population that it's very Asian-based may respond differently, may have different outcomes than a population that is Western European or African descent. So that's why it's really important to have these worldwide data.
Thank you. So we now, especially for the drug developers, so there's a long way to get approval, especially for the global approval. So sometimes we still, administrations, they have the barriers from the different region. So you mentioned that if we can use our society, to standardize some infrastructure, like the independent review board or the pathology or imaging. So if we have the infrastructure, maybe make it more easier to understand the different regions trials, so to get more like the standardized, be credited by the administration approval. Very good thinking. Thank you.
I think we collect too much data on our clinical trials too, that there's stuff that we keep putting in because we think we need to put in, but most of that can be captured in the medical record. But really what we need to collect is the data to answer a scientific question. And if there's less data, then there's less data harmonization, and then it's easier to look at things. But we just have magnesium every third Tuesday. Doesn't need to be in every trial, but you collect that data and it just screws everything up.
So actually, we do collect a lot of data. In China, we perform a lot of biopsy. It's not easily performed in Western country. We for us, we do bronchoscopy, needle biopsy, try to get tissue. We can perform the omics, multi-omics study. So actually, in China, we just follow the SOP of clinical study. We use the global, the CRO, and in Schuchter, we follow the standardization of data management, the assay, and in Schuchter, maybe there are kind of pharmacogenetic differences between the different population. But for target therapy, I do not think the difference is so huge. So I have one question for Dr. Xu. You perform very good study. The study need to approve your compound in the United States, right? For the nasopharyngeal carcinoma, for the uncommon cancer, do we need a kind of global study? The PD-1 plus chemo proved to be very efficacious in Chinese population. Do you think we need a kind of study in the United States to confirm efficacy? I'm not sure. Can you say something?
It's a very good question. So this is first to PD-1 monantibody, so to the innovative product, so be approved in FDA, but generated by the Chinese farm. So PD-1 monantibody, but in the rare disease like the nasopharyngeal carcinoma, because there's no standard of care, there's no approved product in states. So they like to trust all results generated from the local. So come to inspection and see the quality. So they consider this is good. So accept and approve this polymer PD-1 monantibody for the indication. So this may be one of the example, especially for the Oriental disease, maybe so more to open to get from the local data for the administration proof. Thank you.
Yeah,
so I would like, pass the microphone to Lee.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to comment on the esophageal cancer FDA approval of the China anti-PD-1 antibody, because esophageal cancer is such a rare disease. It's an orphan disease in the U.S. So therefore, data generated from multi-regional trial outside of the U.S. will be taken pretty much totally in its totality. Of course, data quality, etc. That's all given. So thank you, Dr. Xu. I think we discussed a lot about disparities in clinical trials, but a bigger elephant in the room is disparities in terms of access to, especially to the innovative therapies. These are expensive therapies. These will require repeated biopsies, for example, will require molecular diagnosis, etc. And these things are not very easily available outside of the US, to be honest, right? Even in Europe, it's not easy to get access. So I have a question for Professor Fan. The ambassador of Pakistan to the United Nations asked squarely, he said, how can all your key opinion leaders from US and from China, how can you devise a plan so that the patients in Pakistan can actually access easy, convenient, safe, tolerable treatments?
So that's just thank you. That is a very good question. So why we host this meeting? I don't think it's focused on that's one molecule or one drug, even how to do clinical trials. To more than 10 million the audience, what we want to do is to how to organize a collaboration, how to share the very good experience from others. That is our aim. That is the last the audience question. This is we have hosted this kind of meeting with the doctors, the famous doctors from the 5 continents before. The total audience is 60 million of the participants. This time we collaborate. We discussed we have the same summit with 3 leading, the world leading the experts from USA. What we want to get for collaboration. So in China, the CACA is a very huge organization. We have over 200 sub society of cancer, and consisting of 700,000 individual members. So we have collaborating with ASCO, AACR, ACS for long years, and through this collaborating, so we doctors and the patients have to get greater benefits. For this, we should extend our thanks, the great thanks to all of you. But we should continue our collaboration in the future. In my opinion, maybe we have keep contacting more close collaboration in the future in at least in many ways, at least 2 ways. Briefly talking, briefly saying, that is we joining you, you joining us, tightly tied together.
And I would.
Sorry. What I didn't finish. So for that, we joining you in many activities we have joined. As for example, in the future, in the developing of guidelines, the process, we want to join you to bring the Chinese data and also Chinese doctors' idea for your references. So if you make the guidelines not just for region, but for the really global. China, we have 1/4 of cancer patients in the world. We have the 1/3 of the cancer days. So our experience is very precious for you. So especially for the rare cancer, because we have a huge population. Rare cancer in China is real. It's not real. So exactly to say, RCT for the clinical trial, I do more than 1,000 drugs clinical trial. So because I'm the national base, I'm the president of a national base. So we found that RCT that just have more than 200 selected people. We get the result from those limited group cannot cover what's suitable for 1,000 or 10,000 folds of cancer patients. So always limited. That is why we suppose the holistic and all factors integrative. This result can solve this problem. So that is we join you and you join us. What means you join us? So we welcome you to join us for different activity, including today. So I will tell you. So in the coming year, November 16 to 18, we will host in Xi'an, it's my city, the annual grant meeting of a holistic integrative oncology in China. So this, we will have the total, the 40,000 the participants, physical participants, and among them, it's about 10,000 the participants from outside, more than 100 countries, to join us together. And also we will release this information to not just nationwide, but also worldwide. Now, by this way, so we can learn from you, you know from me, especially we will hold this meeting as an international. So for the journals, the top journals, we will host the collaborative meeting, CACA with Nature, CACA with Science, with Lancet, New England Medicine, and so on, in a different workshop. And also, we will host the CACA with ASCO, with AACR, with ACS, and other the leading organization in the world in different continents. By this way, so we joined it together. So I hope three of speakers from UNC, please, if you are convenience, you can make on your calendar that November you will be invited to our country to Xi'an. You know, the Xi'an is a very good city. As an ancient capital, it lasting more than 1,000 years. The terracotta there. Also, as an ancient capital, it's lasting 1,000 years. Now, my friends told me, one has not been to China until you have been to Xi'an. So, in other words, it's also said by the foreign friends. If you want to know China history, go to the 5,000 years, you go to Xi'an. The 500 years, go to Beijing. 50,000 years, go to Shanghai. If you want to know 5 years China history, go to airport. So what I would like to say to the over the 10 million people, especially for you. So also the three sentences that I repeat. We join in you, you join in me. tightly tied together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Fan. So collaboration and joining each other, I would suggest that we could also have special sessions with AACR and ASCO annual meetings, if that will be feasible. And of course, you heard the Professor Fan's invitation for next November. So I would like to just ask a couple technical questions, because it is a rare opportunity to have 4 clinical oncologists online here. So first question is, with personalized medicine, of course, we do need to get biopsies, and we do need to get diagnosis, we need to sequence, etc. So I would like to just ask I guess Professor Zhou for lung cancer, Professor Xu for colorectal cancer, Lynn for melanoma. Melanoma is probably the easiest because you do have easy access, but diagnosis and the reporting is a different story. So what do you see, and what do you see currently in your practice in terms of barriers to get this data so that you could personalize treatment for your patients?
You go first, Dr. Xu, your boss.
You go first.
Okay,
lung cancer, for instance.
Okay.
You go first.
For us, we need the testing. Testing is priority of the precision medicine. We have so many biomarkers need to be tested. Nowadays, about 9 or 10 biomarkers. So the first barrier should be have enough tissue. Tissue is always issue, especially for advanced stage. If we can get enough tissue, we can do a lot of tests. The second barrier should be the testing platform. China is huge. We have developed area. We also have undeveloped area. Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou are quite good. We have very good facility for biomarker testing. But in some area, especially small hospitals, there is no facility for biomarker testing. So we need to establish a kind of the testing platform across China. So we need a third barrier should be the turnaround time. Turnaround time should be shorter. In our hospital, about 70% of patients came outside of Shanghai. They take flights, they high-speed train to Shanghai. They could not stay Shanghai much longer, 1 day more. That cost them a lot of money. We need faster the test platform. Turnaround time should be less than 4 days or 3 days. Maybe majority could be tolerated. Otherwise, the patient just receive the chemo. That's kind of problem. The fourth barrier should be the reimbursement. In majority area of China, the biomarker testing patient had to pay from the pocket money. Is not so big, but it is money for many patients. So we hope the test should be reimbursed as soon as possible. We should keep in mind, that the testing is not at the beginning of diagnosis. We should follow the disease. When the patient develops acquired resistance, we should do biopsy, perform the testing, even NGS to find molecular acquired resistance mechanism. That's kind of problem for us. We have 4 barriers for biomarker testing in China. Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Xu. That's your turn.
Thank you. Okay. So in colorectal cancer, different. So we know when we treat a patient, so we have to get a patient like the gene profile, so we can decide the precision option. So initially, we treat a patient with that, but after the combination, maybe all the target therapy, so they've changed a lot. So in my experience, we do like to ctDNA monitoring. So this is one paper we published in Gut. So if we treat it with a regular the standard of the first line treat, the patient initially the RAS mutation, but after several cycles, actually, so we see the ctDNA, the RAS disappeared. So there rise another options for those patients can be treated with like the Erbitux. So because for the RAS mutants, so patient never responds to the Erbitux. But if the patient disappeared, so this is some small trial now is doing like a rechallenge, like the challenge with the, and also we also see some of the RAS type patients treated with chemo. Maybe so we find some of the RAS appear and even the BRAF. So that means the patient keep changing when we treat it with some drugs, the chemo or hardly. So second, like to the biopsy, even with the ctDNA easier, so maybe necessary for the further precision medicine. That's my opinion. Thank you.
And I mean, I'll add, it's actually an interesting point. So for melanoma, often the primary tumor is too small or it's been discarded. So a patient with melanoma may have been diagnosed with their primary melanoma 10 years earlier. And at least in the United States, there's not at every center a requirement to keep the blocks. And so one is it may be gone and or it may be insufficient material. So it is an issue in melanoma. But the other study that we've recently done with one of the ASCO funded investigators actually is looking at some of these barriers. And I think you outlined the really important things, but also physicians don't always order the test. And I mean, even in the examples you just gave of when it's important to do serial testing because of acquired resistance, that's actually not a thing in melanoma. So you either have the BRAF mutation and it's an early event or you don't. And while we've studied resistance mechanisms and we, make some predictions about what other drug to add, it's really not been useful. So we in melanoma just need to test once, especially. We need to make sure it's a comprehensive, some patients just get one gene tested. And so just get BRAF tested, but there are other targets like c-KIT that may be amenable to treatment. So, I think it is still this big piece of education. And somebody that had a test 5 years ago, it may not be the relevant assay in terms of what drugs you have available now. In other diseases, it's important to serially sample, but that's not true in all diseases. So it is really interesting to look at patterns of care and we just see in the United States, it's not always ordered. And all the other things you talked about, turnaround time, access, reimbursement, the tests are key. But the education piece for all of us is key. And we've been looking at, are there different prompts, nudges in the electronic medical record? Is there something in the pathology report that nudges the providers? It is it's iterative. It changes, in terms of then a new drug becomes available.
And during the presentation, I think almost everybody mentioned that we really care about quality of life for our patients. But now we have a lot of drugs, but they are not delivering durable cures yet. So we keep piling them together, right? Doing the combination regimens. And fortunately or unfortunately, chemotherapy is still the backbone for many of the regimens we are using clinically. And we're still dealing with the old classical toxicities, chemo-related toxicity, neutropenia, chemo-induced nausea, vomiting. So I would like to just invite our medical oncologists to comment on what are the challenges you're facing and what are the insights you can share with audience in terms of how to better manage these toxicities and give back the patients their quality of life.
Well, I'll take a shot at that one. I think it's always a balance, and I think it depends a little bit on the disease you're talking about and whether it's done with curative intent. I think you look at childhood leukemias and some other, lymphomas and other aspects where you have a chance to cure patients, then I think people are often more willing to trade off toxicities for that benefit. But when you have, increasing number of patients who are going to live longer periods of time, who want to maintain an active life, and it becomes real important to look at the trade-offs, which are not only sort of the drug toxicities, but could be, oral versus IV drugs, for timing, whether you have to, go to a cancer center, whether you can take treatment at home, how often you need scans, and also the other side effects. So it is, and more as we have patients that are going to live longer and also have, as was mentioned earlier, sometimes complications of treatments that last years beyond the therapy. If you develop type 1 diabetes and adjuvant therapy and a curative treatment, how that's going to impact people going on further on. So I think, oncologists by our nature don't always think about these aspects, at least older oncologists. We thought more about the treatments and get them through. But I think, thinking about obviously, quality of life and survivorship is really important. And so that's obviously an area that I think more research should be put in, and it's folks whose training I think will be different than sort of traditional, oncology training has been. So I think it's a great question.
And, I would add that we certainly are asking more about toxicities and documenting the toxicity and the quality of life studies that often are part of a clinical trial, I think are really important components. And then different strategies to detect the side effects earlier so that we can intervene. I mean, I think, that becomes a problem if we don't, talk to the patient, or we're not aware of the side effect and it gets more severe than it may need to be. I think we didn't actually talk about all the advances in support of oncology, but when you think about what's happened in terms of anti-nausea medication and growth factor support, I mean, certainly the chemotherapy part is a little bit easier now. The other thing I would say, and it gets a little bit in the chat, is I think we as professional societies, we as those that are giving these drugs, we have to be honest about what I was saying, that, how much clinically meaningful improvement is this in the face of toxicity. So when we say this looks really promising and this looks really clinically significant and we extend life by 8 weeks, I think we lose our credibility. And so I think we have to be, really, honest about this. And that's why I was mentioning we have a special session dedicated to this, and will be in the education book, because I think this is important for us to be talking about.
So,
Can I say something?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm very agree to the experts' comments, and I just want to add one thing, that right nowadays the pharmaceutical company will produce the high effect and low toxicity the drug to reduce the side effects of chemotherapy. And I think that's we have a lot of drugs for reduce the chemotherapy, like nausea, vomiting, or the leukemia. So some drugs are very effective, but I think that's not enough. I think the psychological support and the nutrition support is also very important, because the patients are aware of the chemotherapy effective, and before they have the chemotherapy, they have the they're nervous and aware about the side effect. So we think we'd better give them psychological support and tell them the side effect is not as serious as you think. And then for the leukemia, we can use the drug for increase the neutrocytes, but we also can use the nutrition support, because one expert said if you use the nutrition support, that can increase the neutrocyte. I think that's a very good method to add to beside the drugs. So that's
Dr.
my
Wang.
opinion.
Dr. Wang,
Okay.
Dr. Wang, I quite agree with you. You know, I'm
Thank
over
you.
70 years old. I have treated the GI cancer for almost 50 years. So everybody say effective exactly for the esophageal cancer, stomach cancer, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer. The 5-year survival rate is just less than the 20%, all over the world, including USA. So these effective results also from the surgery, chemotherapy, the targeting chemotherapy, immune therapy. So the 50 years, no people change this very remarkably. Just like my teacher, how to change this problem, how to improve the 80% of the 5 years rate. We just focus on one molecule, one drug, one method. We should how to integrate the factors from whole body, including nutrition, including exercise, including psychological and the others. So we can solve this problem. We can. That is my 50 years career, Dr. Carey's the last opinion. So that is we suggest holistic integrative medicine, the concept. Do not just focus on one factor that we will fail for a long time. That is my idea.
Thank you, Dr. Fang.
Yeah, let me just say one thing here. I mean, I think on a more optimistic note, I think one has to look at where the future of oncology and cancer care is going. We're talking about more and more targeted specific drugs that have less and less off-target toxicities. So that will diminish toxicities. And we're also talking about the development of delivery methods that can selectively deliver drugs to tumor targets. And for example, there are now molecules that can be caged, and the cage is essentially released by molecules in the tumor microenvironment, such as, in a simple way, just pH, where it's released because of the high acid environment. So I think that while these are unquestionably very real issues and very important right now, I do think that the future is actually much brighter than this, and that a lot of the problems we're trying to solve will actually be solved by science while we're trying to address these.
Yeah, I totally agree. About 50% of patients receive the chemo-free frontline therapy. We have targeted therapy. About 15% of patients just treat PD-1, PD-L1 monotherapy. That's quite big, the population. We need human board to control the side effect of the chemo. Now the chemo side effect could be easily controlled with a best supportive care. We have anti-metic compound, we have non-home GCS and insectual, we have nutrition. The toxicity of chemo could be easily controlled. In near future, we have good compound waiting for us. Maybe we have ADC compound, we have vaccine, as mentioned earlier, we have maybe cell therapy, CAR-T, TILs, and insectual. This combination could improve the treatment tolerability in our patients. That's good area, but we need work together, with and East work together to find best treatment for our patients.
Yes, so I would give some comments. So actually, in our country, still many patients have a concern about the chemotherapy. So some of them maybe they will give up the treat when they hear they have to receive the chemo because they said chemo means death. So that's as a professional society, we need more education for the people, for especially for the patient or patient relatives. Actually, so we see some improvement in past 2 decades. Like in my experience, the colon cancer, so maybe 20 years ago, the patient can only survive 10 or 12 months. But right now, the median also is more than 3 years. But definitely, so chemotherapy contributes a lot. I totally agree. So now we have like to promote for the targeted therapy, immunotherapy, so it change a lot. So like the chemotherapy, now we have the ADC, so that's different. So we can like to target the toxic, the cytotoxic. So improve the efficacy and also decrease the toxicity. Of course, we need to integrate that holistically integrate the different methods like the nutrition or supportive care, like the coronal stimulating factor for the neutropenia. So avoid those different failure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. As I promised to all the audience at the beginning of the event, we will deliver you a 2-hour stimulating scientific discussion. Now we are 2.5 hours into our event, so I will conclude this event. But really, before we say goodbye, I want to thank all the speakers, all our 5 speakers, and Dr. Xu and Dr. Wang for joining us, giving this excellent discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you. And also, it's really great. I just want to thank our organizers, the CACA, my own organization, USCACA, as well as our co-organizers, and especially the colleagues behind the scene, including Ming Hua from eChina Health and his colleagues, as well as our sponsors, Beijing, Europe, Amoy Diagnostics, and Fusion Pharma. Last but most important, I really want to thank millions of attendees online. We just broke 16 million attendees. 16 million.
Wow.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you for your interest. Thank you for your hard work to make a difference for our patients around the globe. So we'll see you in 2024, and hopefully both online and offline in person. Until then, goodbye and happy holidays.